Hello, my name's Jade and welcome to the Stone Blind reading vlog. As previously mentioned, primarily I'll be reading Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. Natalie Haynes wrote 1,000 Ships, which I haven't actually read. I own it, but I haven't read it. Hopefully I'll read it by the end of the year. She also wrote, The Children of Jocasta. I have read that one. I really enjoyed it. I will find a video where I discuss it and link to it down below if you want to hear my thoughts on that one. I think I give it like a 9 out of 10. I really enjoyed it, and I remember having like questions at the end of it, but kind of liking that I had questions and I had like a really good sit down think about what I thought, and I wrote this like whole book review on it. It was clever. It's like an Oedipus retelling, but it's kind of different. It's a good one. It's interesting. I've also read Pandora's Jar, which is non-fiction, and it's one of my it's my favorite non-fiction book, I think. I really loved that one, and there's like a sequel coming out to it later this year called Divine Might. I'm really excited about it. Anyway, Stone Blind came out towards the end of last year and I was really excited for it. It was one of my most anticipated releases of last year, but by the time it came around to reading it, when it came out and whatnot, I just wasn't in the mood. So I love Natalie Haynes. Even though I've only read 2 of her books, she also is a radio show / podcast host. Natalie Haynes stands up for the classics, which I've listened to the whole thing. I'm obsessed. And also just kind of when I first learned about her, I think it was around the time I read, I can't remember if it was The Children of Jocasta or Pandora's Jar. I want to say it's Pandora's Jar, but I feel like I read them not very far from each other. I just became obsessed with her. She's so funny and so intelligent, and she talks a lot about kind of feminism, women in ancient Greek myth kind of stuff, as you can tell from this book. And I just really love her. I'm a big fan of Natalie Haynes. So it's about time I got around to reading Stone Blind, and also there's an event happening in May in which she will be talking about Stone Blind in the Roman baths, no less. The Roman baths. How magical is that? We're reading Stone Blind. I've established this, I think. Yes. Should I tell you what it's about? It's Medusa's story. Do I need to tell you anything else? It is one of those, I know 1,000 Ships was written in this style as well. I don't know how similar they actually are to each other, obviously, because I haven't read 1,000 Ships. But we're jumping around from different people's perspectives a lot, primarily women, but I've had a flick through and I have a feeling might dip into some men. I don't think we've dipped into any men thus far. No men thus far, so it might not be any men. I know that 1,000 Ships is only women's point of views. So we're following Medusa at times, we're following her sisters, Athene's come up, Metis has come up, and I was like, I know the name Metis. Who are you? Why do I know you? It's Athena's mum. I'm gonna go between Athena and Athene. Well, I refer to her as Athena. That's how I've always known her since I was a kid. She's called Athene in this book. So I'm gonna be bouncing between the two of them. Apologies in advance. The way that we're following all these different characters around her makes me think it's gonna be like a really whole story. Is that everything? I came here to give you a synopsis. And I feel like I've given you everything but. I love the cover. I got the Waterstones Special Edition. I did start it last night. I'm on page 73. Initial thoughts. What are the initial thoughts? I'm really enjoying it this far. I was really worried that I wasn't going to like it because I'm such like a Natalie Haynes stan. So far so good. I'm really enjoying it. It's like funny. It's not like hilarious. I would definitely think Natalie is funnier, but like the narration style is almost this like grand epic, like I will tell you a story kind of style. So that kind of humor wouldn't work as well, but there's definitely the humor is coming through. I've laughed quite a lot so far. I love Medusa. She's so smart. She is so endearing. I think I'm gonna try and keep this spoiler free. If I do at any point mention spoilers, then I will warn you. Is it a spoiler if it happened this early into the book? And it's Medusa's story. Like, if you know nothing about Medusa, then I'm probably going to talk about her story. But we've gone past like the Poseidon rape scene. And her conversation with Poseidon was so interesting. That's like my favourite point of the book so far. Just the way she could like outwit him. I'm surprised, because it's in Athena's temple, I'm surprised that we didn't have the whole, how Athens came to be. Maybe it's coming, maybe I'm like being too preemptive, but I when we were leading up to that and Poseidon was like looking at the temple and was like, yeah, this is gonna be my temple, I want it. And I think it was just before Athena was born. I presumed that it's not going to be his temple, it's going to be Athena's temple. That's how like Medusa's going to play into it. And there's going to be the whole, you know, who's going to like reside over Athens, who's Athens going to belong to. I love the sisters so far. Hera's really interesting so far. We haven't seen a lot of Athena considering how integral her role is. Oh, that was the other thing. Going back to the whole temple thing and like how is this whole Medusa Poseidon thing gonna play out? As far as I am aware, and I'm not no expert, so like I could be wrong here. There's two versions, or two primary versions of Medusa's story, and there's the one where she started off human and then Poseidon raped her and then Athena cursed her, turned her into a Gorgon. And then there's the one where she's always been a Gorgon and she has Gorgon sisters. And because we know Medusa is inherently a Gorgon already, I was wondering like how that was going to come to be. I didn't know if there was any ancient sources where there was like an ancient version where she was already a Gorgon and then she was also raped by Zeus and then Athena also cursed her. So I was wondering like how they were going to connect like the Poseidon Medusa storyline if she's already a Gorgon. And so that's what I was thinking, that's where the temples are going to come in. Writing style, going back to the writing style, is really interesting. We're constantly jumping from different people's perspectives, but it's not jarring. Like, we're in people's perspectives in that, like, we have a Medusa chapter, and then we have an Athena chapter, and then we have a Metis chapter. I'm just literally saying all the names that I can pronounce. But even within those chapters, we're jumping from different people's point of view. It's third person consistently. We're looking at things the way those characters look at them, and like we can hear their inner thoughts. It's very interesting. It's very well done. I really like the writing style so far. I think the characters are really well done so far, and I'm just really intrigued. I'm like 20% through. Not a lot has happened, bar maybe one of the most pivotal scenes, the Poseidon rape scene. I'm just wondering like how the pacing's gonna work, the rest of it, because I'm assuming Perseus is gonna come in. I mean, we've gotten mentions of him, although we don't know that it's him yet, but we've got mentions of Perseus as a baby. It's just, I don't know. I'm sure it would be great. I really hope that like my initial positive reaction keeps up. I also thought I'd actually mention, since it's like a reading vlog situation, I normally do read 2 books at once. So the other book I'm going to be reading this week is Agatha Christie's Sinister Spring. I cannot talk. It's the end of the day. I'm tired. Which is a collection of short stories by Agatha Christie set in spring, or I don't know why whatever reason the editor of this book or the publisher of this book decided they're all related to spring. It's a very pretty book. I've read 3 stories so far. The Market Basing Mystery, which is a Poirot mystery. That's the first time like I've ever seen like Poirot writing. I've watched the films but I've never read a Poirot anything, so that was exciting. Which was fine. I liked it. I wasn't obsessed with it. The Case of the Missing Lady, I really liked that one. I loved Tommy and Tuppence, which are like detectives we're following, and they're kind of bumbling around trying to figure it out. I enjoyed that one quite a bit. And The Herb of Death, which is a Marple story, and I like the way that one was told because we're following like a group of guests at a dinner party, or like they've just had dinner, they're sat around chatting, and one of them is relaying a story of a mystery, and then everyone else is gonna like, they're trying to guess what happened and like how this death occurred. So it was a very interesting like way of telling the story, and I was apprehensive to start it, but I'm enjoying it so far, so maybe I'll keep you updated on how I'm liking this one as well. That is all for now. I am literally about to start reading some more Stone Blind, so I'll let you know when I have more thoughts. Okay, bye. It's now Tuesday morning. I'm about to start work. Well, technically I've started work. I'm having old work. Well, I'm waiting for something to upload. Anyway, regardless, I read a little bit more of Sinister Spring this morning, and so I thought I would tell you my thoughts on those stories while they're fresh in my mind. Let's see, there was another Poirot one, which I think was my favourite one that I've read today, maybe even thus far in the collection. It's the one that I've been the most invested in, I think. How Does Your Garden Grow, which is like the nursery rhyme. Cockle shells all in a row, or maids all in a row, and silver bells, and you know, that one. You know the one. Yeah, I was just most invested in that mystery itself. All the other ones have been kind of the Market Basing Mystery, and The Case of the Missing Lady I was invested in the mystery, and then The Herb of Death I kind of like my concentration ebbed and flowed. And I had a similar thing happen with the second short story I read today, which was Swan Song, which I kind of didn't pay very much attention to, but also as soon as, like, it was a lot of build-up for, in my opinion, like, a lot, like, I predicted what the thing was going to be as soon as it was kind of brought up. Like, I knew what it was going to be. So all that built up was not necessarily in my mind. It could have been a lot shorter. And then we have Miss Marple Tells a Story. This is my first time kind of getting to know Miss Marple. As I think I mentioned yesterday, I've like never read Poirot or Marple before. She's interesting. She's an interesting character. I don't love her. She's one of these people that's like self-aware, but like she doesn't, like she's pretending to be self-aware. She's like, oh, I won't go on, but then she does go on and she knows what she's doing. And yeah, I don't know, I just don't know how I feel about her. It's an interesting case. She's very clever, but yeah, and that one's just fine. I wasn't obsessed with it. The Poirot ones seem to be kind of some of my favourites thus far. And that one with Tuppence and Tommy, The Case of the Missing Lady, I want them to come back. So look at this lighting though, look at it. Gorgeous. I need to do work now. See you later. It's sunny today, so hopefully I'll get to read outside some at some point. Fingers crossed. I didn't read as much last night as I was hoping to, but I'm hoping to catch up tonight. But I just read the part with the Graiai and I completely forgot about them. When I first kind of started learning about Greek myth back in primary school, so vividly remember hearing the story of the Graiai and like Perseus's interaction with them, and like the section with the Graiai was just so funny, and I just found it really funny and I found it really amusing. And I remember like how he like tricks them. It's so sad reading it here. I do have a lot of thoughts actually that I took last night when I was reading, and I'm sure I'll add to them and then go through them tomorrow once I've washed my hair, because I cannot look at myself any longer. I think I'm like halfway through the Spear right now, so that's pretty cool. That's my little update for now. Hopefully I'll get more read tonight. Update time. I haven't actually read any of Stoneblind yet today, but I did manage to get to page 222 last night, which is what I wanted, so good. I don't actually have many notes from last night in particular. I think of all the nights that I've been reading this book, last night was the night that I enjoyed it the least. I'm just starting to question a couple of things, but we'll get on to that in a second. First, I'll update you for Sinister Spring, which I did read a bit of today. I'm actually like halfway through the story at the minute. Have You Got Everything You Want, The Jewel Robbery at the Grand Metropolitan, and Ingots of Gold. Ingots of Gold was quite intriguing. It's another Marple, but again it's told like retrospectively. Have You Got Everything You Want, quite random. It takes place mostly on a train. It was fine, I was invested, but it didn't like found me or anything. This is the thing with like these being so short, like they're so short that you don't get time to like start theorizing yourself, which is fine, but it means a lot of time when these like plot twists happen I don't care very much. The Jewel Robbery at the Grand Metropolitan, that was a Poirot, and that's probably my favorite of today. I really like Poirot. I read it mostly while I work out, so I listen to an audiobook while I do my workouts in the morning a lot of the time. So that's mostly where I've been reading this, but I left the house, and so I read some on the bus. I went and got a tattoo, which was really exciting. I might show you that later. Tried, like, when I got back to read some more of it, but just wasn't feeling it. I was feeling tired. But anyway, Stone Blind, I have some notes, so I thought I'll update you on the notes and my thoughts while I'm still in it, because I only have 2 more nights, I think, left of this baby. Put my mug down on my notes. Okay, so the first 2 things I have are really pedantic. Realize is spelled with a Z a lot of the time, and like those, you know, utilize, those kinds of words that in English spelling are spelled with an S. I don't know if it's because I've become hyper aware of it recently, but it's spelled with a Z. I've become hyper aware of it because I've been seeing a lot of people, like in England, using English spelling things with Zs, and I just don't understand. So I thought I'd bring it up in case anyone else has any thoughts on it. The second thing is sometimes there'll be like a break and there'll be like a little asterisk in the middle of the page. I'm sure you've all seen this. Sometimes there won't be the asterisk and it'll just be a break, and there doesn't seem to be a differentiation between when one is used over the other. There must be. And I've noticed books do this before, where sometimes they use an asterisk and sometimes they don't, and again, I've never been able to find differentiation. So why? Is it that big a deal? No, but it does take me out because I'm thinking, like, why isn't there an asterisk? I mean, it's not make or break, but again, I wanted to bring it up. I've also been trying to think of like our main story here. I'm sat in a really bad position considering where I got tattooed, but we're gonna barrel through it. And I wondered at one point if women being wronged / used is like the common thread that's pulling a lot of these stories together. I don't think it is. I think it's like we're following our big characters. We're following our Medusa and our Athena and Perseus, and anything kind of relating to them and like the overarching story will be included for the sake of having as many perspectives as possible. And on the note of having as many perspectives as possible, I kind of almost wonder if like it could be reined back a little bit, and this links to the biggest problem I think I've had thus far, which is like the timeline and the jumping around. One of the notes here I have is, why is there such a big gap between Medusa being raped and then her punishment from Athena? There's a pretty substantial gap in between, and we don't see from Medusa's pod very much at all. We've been largely staying with Athena and Perseus and all the other kind of members. We stayed with her quite a bit in the beginning, and then since then really long chunks will go by until we see her, and it feels, it's funny because it's her story, but it feels like we're following everything but her in a way. We're following how this like happened to her, but because, you know, there's her being raped and then there's the curse and then there's, you know, what happens in the end, she doesn't really have much of a role to play other than that. It's her story, but it's not really about her. But I want it to be about her. I'm wondering if I would prefer if there was just like little snippets of like mundanities from her life. And I wondered if we pushed the rape scene back so it happened later in the book and spaced the time of her growing up, spread it out a little bit, because it does seem to be in chronological order, but I have a feeling that things aren't happening as they're placed in the book. Like, that's not the order of events, because Perseus's quest must take a while. And so unless we're leaving Medusa for like months on end and then coming back to her, each of these characters, like, time is working differently for them, and that like eventually all come to a crossroads and that's where they'll all meet. I'm not sure. That's my biggest thing, like, what is going on with the timeline, because we're constantly jumping around. It feels like the way some of the things have come to is like I can't find the random reason. Like the fact that there was that really big gap felt a little odd to me, and the way that Athena just randomly remembered it. And again, I was wondering, like, what if we had that the whole ordeal with Athens being named, because it never came to. Remember, I was like looking for it. It never happened. But because Poseidon and Athena do have this rivalry going on, it would have worked so naturally. I don't know why we didn't include that. She's mad at Poseidon as well because of the whole Hephaestus whole debacle. And I know that, like, probably the reason why she didn't have that debacle happen and Athena already being mad at Poseidon when she decides to Medusa, because then that's going to be like, well, she was already mad, so like she was already in a heightened state of emotion, so that's why she punished. Like, we don't need to give her any excuse for punishing Medusa, because there isn't really a reason why. She punishes Medusa because she feels like it, and that's literally it. Like, it doesn't, the order and the amount of space between things, it doesn't always make the most sense to me. As I'm sitting here telling you about it, I'm really struggling coming up with examples. Like, I wish I spoke about this last night, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm just like expecting too much from the book. I don't know. I also don't know where we're going with this like whole Athena's kid. I don't know that myth, so I have no idea where that's going. There's definitely a symbol of birds happening, like the fact that the two stones we saw first, like the statues, were birds is definitely less relevant, and the fact that birds keep coming up with like her owl, or in the point of view of a Corinx, like they're mentioned a lot. Something's going on with birds, and like it must be a symbol. I keep coming back to the idea that birds are free. That's where I'm at right now. I don't know if that's right. I feel like it's not. I feel like there's too weak a link. Oh, do you know what else I wanted to see from Medusa? So she's punished. We don't spend any time with her. We might spend some time with her being consoled by her sisters, and then the next time we see her, I think, is when she's like taking off the bandage and she's like going to the sun. But we skip over the fact that she has snakes for hair. Like, I want to see her getting used to having snakes for hair. I wanted to see that. Like, that was another instance that we could have spent more time with her, because it's supposed to be about her and we're already spending so little time with her. Like, when you have normal hair and then all of a sudden you have snake hair, I feel like that takes some adjusting. Takes some getting used to. And then we have these Gorgoneon chapters, which is a really interesting perspective, and I feel like it comes up a couple other times, maybe like the Nereid? No. Oh no. Nereid. Nereid. They're these like ominous, omnipotent almost point of views. But this Gorgoneon, like, it has a personality. And I quite like the personality. And we had this chapter, page 112, right after Perseus learns that he has to go on this quest. And very biased. It's going on about how we shouldn't feel sorry for him, and at that point you kind of do, because he's still like very young and he's trying to help his mum, and it harps on about like how save his mum from what, like getting married to this king. Like, it would have been an inconvenience, sure, but like she would have been fine, she would have got over it. The king probably would have got bored of her, yada yada yada. Because I'm sitting here from a modern perspective, I'm aware of that. Peoples of this time probably wouldn't have been thinking in the way that I'm thinking at. And I'm sat here, what about like having autonomy over your life and control over your life, and not having to be married off to this man? Because how do we know this man wouldn't have been really cruel? How do we know he would have got bored of her? Being married off by force still isn't great. Perseus, when he signs up to it, he doesn't know what a Gorgon is. He doesn't know what bring back a Gorgon head entails. He doesn't know that he's going to kill someone. So at that point, it was just like, it was a lot. This perspective was a lot. Obviously it's biased, and I don't think we're supposed to like 100% like just like keel over and be like, yeah, she should have just married the guy, it would have been fine. I had this with Children of Jocasta, where I was constantly debating with myself whether I liked things or not, like kind of with the timeline, like I was just saying. I can't decide, I don't know. Even the fact that I had the debate was interesting. I thought like it raises questions that don't have answers. Because I was thinking about like this, you know, having autonomy over yourself and stuff. And like, how do we know he wouldn't have killed her? How do we know he would have been like a fair husband to her? Like, how do we know he wouldn't have like ended up killing her? She could have been miserable for the rest of her life. Perseus could have been like used and abused and miserable for the rest of his life. How do we weigh one life over another life? It's like, if her life was just gonna be completely miserable, she might as well have like been dead, you know? How do you weigh that up? How can you so surely say that Medusa therefore, I mean, she obviously completely innocent in all of this, didn't want to have to do with anything, just like kept to herself. If anything, has already been victimized and now becoming even more victimized. I'm not saying like kill Medusa, but it's an interesting debate, I think. But I think it's just because the text is so rich with all these like themes, and they're so buried. They're buried very well. I think it's clever being done. And I am enjoying it. Last night was a low rocket. I think it's because there's a lot of Perseus. There's a lot of Athena. And I'm like, the spending less time away from Medusa was starting to grate on me a little bit. So we'll see how the night goes. I'm enjoying that. He is so annoying. And I know that Natalie Haynes doesn't like Perseus from Pandora's Jar. It's like she's hamming it up. She's hamming up how pathetic he is and how little he can do. And part of me is like, but is it realistic? Like, would it be more interesting if he was like given a fair shot, almost? Like, I kept thinking back to Ariadne and have Theseus and Ariadne, who is, from what I know so far, he's my least favourite character from Greek myth. He just is awful, doesn't begin to describe the amount of crap he does and the amount of like horrible stunts he pulls on people. But he's not necessarily painted that way in Ariadne. Obviously he's a dick still. But like, I remember seeing in a review from Erica on Monique of Ariadne, I'll link it down below, how like Jennifer Saint could have like really hammed up how awful he is, and she kind of chose not to. She didn't want to give him the attention, I think was why she didn't do that. I was almost like wondering if like that would have been more interesting to read from Perseus, but at the same time he is really pathetic. And he's young, isn't he? I feel like he's young. I feel like if he was like 16 or something when it all kicked off, I think he might be a little bit older now. I think somewhere there like a year had passed maybe. But his interactions with Athena are very interesting. I almost want Athena to be a little smarter. Like she's so cocky that her being the goddess of wisdom doesn't always come through, I think. But I also don't know if it's just because, like I said, we're skipping time periods. We didn't have like a real solid point with her at her birth. I will say that the pacing I'm liking is constantly moving, it's constantly reading quickly. It feels like there's a lot jammed in here, and I wonder if there was a version of this book that was a little bit longer or was able to be a little more spread out and had more breathing room. Good chat. I will report back when I have more thoughts and feelings. Saturday. I finished Stone Blind Thursday night. I thought I'd give myself like a day to digest before I came back and like summarized my thoughts. So far I have very similar feelings, or at least initial feelings, to when I finished The Children of Jocasta. I didn't know what to think. I was going back and forth so much, and I sat there and I had to like write a full length like essay review type thing to digest my thoughts and feelings and kind of come to peace with how I really felt. I've written a pretty long Goodreads review thus far, but my rating could shift a little higher, my rating can shift a little lower. I gotta wrap up this video at some point, so I'm gonna give you my thoughts for now anyway. Quickly, I wanted to talk about Sinister Spring first because I finished this one yesterday, Friday. Where did we get up to? The Soul of the Croupier. I liked it more than some. Like I actually was like invested in paying attention to this one, but was another one of those where it was a lot of build up to not enough of like a twist, not enough of like a reveal. The Girl in the Train, I quite liked this one. I really enjoyed this one. I thought this one was really fun. I vividly remember listening to it while putting washing on the line. Don't know if that helped. It was very mysterious and intriguing. Like you didn't even know what the mystery really was. It was one of those where there's like a mysterious girl on a train and you're trying to figure out like who she is and what's going on with her. I have the last one, Greenshaw's Folly, which I definitely feel like the longest in this collection. It's another Marple story. She takes a backseat to a lot of them, I found, and her niece and nephew kind of come up a lot, and I'm definitely intrigued to read more from Marple. And I enjoyed that one as well. It was interesting. The mystery was one that I was more invested in and it kind of got me. So I guess like the 3 Poirot and then those 2 Marple ones. To be fair, all of the Marple ones are interesting. I'm just not sure how I feel about Marple as a character per se. On the whole, I was really surprised because I read And Then There Were None earlier this year. I'll link the video where I discussed it down below, and I was kind of like this with it. Like I was invested and intrigued, and I read it really, really quickly, and I thought it was an easy, read. But I found this character's really stereotypical and there wasn't enough clues for me to figure out the mystery. Like I just had to take complete shots in the dark, and I've never been like that with a mystery before. I normally can guess some things. But I really enjoyed this, and I'm definitely going to read the other kind of seasons in this collection, and this has inspired me to pick up a Marple book, I think, sooner, definitely. It's very pretty. I audiobooked it. I don't know if I mentioned that. I'll put the narrators on screen, and they did a fine job. Really enjoyed the audiobook. Will definitely kind of audiobook. I think I'll probably audiobook all of Christie's work. She's one of those authors that I think is going to help me a lot. So on to Stone Blind. I'm going between an 8 and a 9 out of 10. So let's start with the positive. I mean, the first thing to say is that I did enjoy it. It was an enjoyable read. It was humorous at times. Like I said, the characters can be quite sarcastic and like have that dry British humor. I don't think it was as funny as Haynes herself is, but I think part of the charm of her humor is it's the way she like intones it, and it's her telling the story that makes it funny. When she's kind of removed a little bit, I don't know if it was as funny. But like I kind of laughed under my breath quite a lot, so it's definitely there, I would say. The way that you don't see as much in retellings, I'd say. A lot of times retellings can be very serious and to the point. I must have laughed at retellings before, but it's prevalent in this one. There is that kind of sarcasm and wit. Wit is the word I want throughout. It's like, even in the writing style, it read really, really quickly. It's a very easy read. The writing was really immersive. The characters felt fully formed, but I wanted to kind of spend more time with them. Like, I don't think by any means it's necessarily a character-based story. I did like coming away, the characters aren't necessarily what I think of. Apart from Perseus was really, as much as I said earlier, like, would it be clever if he was kind of given more of a neutral stance? I still kind of felt for him at times, despite the Gorgonale telling me not to. And like, there were human kind of moments, even like at the end, there was 1 or 2 times where I kind of, you know, I felt emotion for him. So I do think he was well done. I think the characterization was really strong. I just wanted to spend more time with them because we were so busy jumping about. I think one of the things I wanted was for it to be longer so that we could spend more time with those characters. With the jumping around so much, here's the thing. We don't spend very much time with Medusa herself. She was my favourite character. I thought she was so clever. And I wanted to see more of her just like mundane, everyday life. Even just like tiny little fragments, just so we could keep checking in on her and seeing what's going on with her throughout the book. I don't know the Medusa kind of cycle of myths very well, so I'm just taking a lot of it as it comes. But she definitely, because the way she became Medusa in and of itself, I talked about this earlier, felt like she was kind of twisting a couple different myths together, and so I definitely got the feeling of that throughout this. The way she kind of connects scattered little pieces of the puzzle where Medusa is mentioned, or these myths can be tied together, and kind of fitted them into one larger story, even if, you know, it took a little bit of bending and meandering. I thought that was really well done. I liked that she incorporated a vast amount of different stories that I've kind of heard bits and pieces of, and a vast of different perspectives and point of views and characters. I really thought that was well done. Like, the shifting of point of views is really clever. We have like a bird's perspective and a reed's perspective. Oh, the reed chapter I really liked. BT dubs. The tree's perspective. Maybe I should tell you this now in regards to the tree because it's relevant to that chapter. Remember earlier on I was like, why don't we have the story of like how Athens came to be and like Athena versus Poseidon? Why that story was mentioned, I don't know. Like, it didn't seem to add much to the book at that point. I always assumed it was going to add fuel to this like Poseidon versus Athena debate. I just wonder if it came earlier, if it would have made more sense, like in a point where like this rivalry is really building, and then we could have a bigger crescendo of that rivalry. Like, nothing really came of it. But then at the same time, this is what I do with Haynes' books. I sit here and I argue to myself about how I think and how I feel about it. In time, the gods don't act like that. Like, they're immortal, so there's never going to be a winner. It's going to be ever going. There's always going to be this push and pull for a story, for a narrative arc. That's kind of what you want to happen. That's like just naturally what you crave in the way that our stories are told these days. That point of like how our stories are told these days is also really interesting, because how stories are told these days is very different from how like ancient Greeks and Romans told their stories and their narrative style and structure. It was very like bits and pieces came and went. I listened to someone say this on an interview. It was Erica's channel again, Moan Inc. I think I mentioned her multiple times in this video already. She did an interview with the host of, I can't remember the name of the podcast, it's like Ancient Myths Baby, I think. Ancient Myth, Greek Myth Baby, something to that effect. I'll link the podcast down below as well if you wanted to check it out, in the interview I'm referencing now. And she said about how like when you get an intimate, that's something to like keep in mind. There's never going to be a clean story. There's going to be bits and pieces. People are going to be dropped for no apparent reason. Like, we don't have the full backscript. A lot of their work doesn't survive. It doesn't make sense to us in the way that we tell our stories now. I highly recommend to listen to that interview because she says it in a much more eloquent way. So in that vein, the narrative style of this, the constant, you know, different perspectives and the way characters, their motives weren't fully formed at times, is very natural to how they tell their stories, and it's very reminiscent of that. And as chaotic as it felt, like I mentioned, the chronology and the way that timelines weren't parallel, and it didn't feel like they were parallel, it didn't feel like these things could all be happening like in the same order of events across the same amount of time. Found evidence that that wasn't the case. Hephaestus's kid, I don't know why we always call him Athena's kid when it's also Hephaestus's kid. It's more Hephaestus's kid than Athena's kid, if anything. He like born somewhere over here, and then years pass and then we meet up with him again, so years have passed since that point, so like that timeline cannot line up in the same way, it feels like. While reading it, it felt a little chaotic. We never had time to settle, the stories never became fully formed, and it was kind of like resisting it. But then I thought about it, I was like, huh, what does this remind me of? When was this like this weird chaotic whirlpool of different narratives coming together to create one larger meandering scope of things? And it's of this metamorphosis, which Medusa is integral in. She even like uses the word metamorphosis at one point, like I think in reference to Medusa's change, and I was like, ha, I see what you did there. Always metamorphosis, if you don't know, is kind of like the history of all the myths from like Greek through to Roman. I feel like I read somewhere that they're all kind of with a focus on metamorphosis and change. And so Medusa and like her story, and what her story represents is like, she's like the poster child for that, like change and appearance, and those kind of themes did keep coming up. Bird imagery, like the bird imagery has to mean something deeper. Oh, I did think of something actually. It's interesting that both Medusa and Perseus at different points have wings, or like birds. Is it like the natural and the mythical coming together is what I'm thinking, to create like a like for us and our modern non-mythical, we don't necessarily read fantasy in the same way that they read fantasy and thought of fantasy and thought of fiction. A symbol to kind of bring it on our plane for us as modern readers, but also to kind of poke fun at that whole monster debate, because really liked that section where Medusa was talking to her sisters about what monsters are. I cried, I teared up. Athena said like the exact same thing a couple chapters on, so like the similarities and differences between Perseus and Athena and like Medusa and her sisters and like these different sides, like I think, and then add the wings metaphor into this, like there's no good side, there's no bad side, it's all just kind of one cohesive natural occurrence is kind of what I'm thinking. It's not a fully formed thought yet, but that's the kind of vein I'm thinking of. But like I said, it's very reminiscent of Abby's metamorphosis, so this narrative style, and I think I've been like leading up to this point, it really suits as much as like I got confused as unnatural as these like now object pops felt. Like at first I was like, is it just here for the sake of being artsy? Like, do we need it to be told to us in this way? But it felt so reminiscent of the way ancient Greeks told their stories. And it was fun and it was creative and it was interesting. So my final point is about the lack of Medusa, and this is something I've seen in other reviews, and I agree, it's valid. It's marketed, it literally says Medusa's story, but we don't see her half as much as it feels like we see Perseus and Athena, and I don't know if that's recreating the way our society views her. Like when we hear Medusa's story, we think of Perseus and Athena and the way he slayed her and all these other kind of involving factors, which is what the book kind of focuses on much more, it feels like, than her human story. It's around her and how it all came to be, and I think that's the point of this retelling though. It's not a feminist retelling in the way that many other feminist retellings, Jennifer Saint is immediately the first one that comes to mind, where we give these women their voices back and they get to tell their own story from their perspective in a way that we don't normally before. I mean, we still get that a little bit because Medusa is still in here, we do still hear her pop, she was still my favourite sections, my favourite character, but it's more about seeing the story as a whole and seeing the story in a way we don't normally see the story, and seeing all the little pieces of the puzzle coming together in a way that we might not naturally put them together. Like if you're not an ancient historian, you don't see these little pieces all over the map, then you wouldn't like kind of tie the links, whereas Haynes has done that for us. Like I mentioned earlier, it's like questioning our perspectives on all of the different characters involved, regardless of how big and how small they are. Like, you know, we have a section from a bird and a reed and a tree. Like, what's their part to play in this, and how did the Greeks think of these things? And big being, you know, Athena and Perseus and these integral characters. And Poseidon, you obviously just come up, and I kept like being like, oh my god, Poseidon, I don't want to hear from you anymore. But he's so integral to her story. How could he not? So I don't think it's necessarily about reclaiming her voice and just telling, like it always comes back to her in a way. Like as much as it feels like we're Miranding, it it inherently, it all does connect back to Medusa in some way, shape or form. And I think it shows like how the scope of our lives, like it's not always like surface level, like things that happen like in further circles around you will inherently affect you. And about how she doesn't have her own like say in her destiny, like these are just things that keep happening to her. Like she goes through a series of things that kind of affect her life and that she's a victim of, like a series of events that change her life forever, and that she can't really help. She's helpless. Things happen to her. By removing it even further and seeing less of her and like seeing how these things are gonna like send shockwaves towards her and her life and her kind of, you know, when she's dead, her reputation and the way we think of her now still being impacted upon her. It's much more like less so about literally reclaiming her voice and much more about clearing up the story and our perspectives on the characters involved as a whole. I feel like I need to do a mic job. I will say I do still think I wanted just a little bit more breathing room, as much as like the chaotic whirlpool makes me think of Ovid and the way stories used to be told. I just wanted a little bit more breathing room just so it could like resonate with me a little bit more. I do wonder if it would benefit from a reread. I know Haynes has talked a lot before about how she likes to reread books and get new meaning from them, and she always writes her books trying to think that like if you reread it you'd gain something new out of it. I'm definitely open to rereading it at some point. I love that idea that you'll always come up with a new perspective. I love that I sit here and have these conversations in the first place, that I question everything from you know, being on a narrative book writing level even to the events of the book and the characters. I question them and think about them on so many different levels, and I love that. I'm going to an event in Bath. I think I might have mentioned this next month. I don't know what time this video is going to come out, so I might even be able to insert some footage at the end. She's going to be talking about this book and it's going to be in the Roman Baths, and I'm very, very excited. Yeah. Especially after sitting and having this talk. See, this is the thing, you need to digest them, you need to sit and write that long review, and you need to sit and talk to a camera for 20 minutes about it to kind of fully come to your thoughts. I have a lot of respect, and I just, the more I sit and think about it, the more clever I think it is. I still think I'm leaning towards more of a 9 out of 10, not a 10 out of 10 like I just said. I still think I wanted a little bit more juice and a little bit more breathing room. And I just don't know if it's going to sit and I'm going to think about it in the same way that I think about, you know, the books I do give 10 out of 10. 9 out of 10 isn't bad. I very much still think of The Children of Chicago as a 9 out of 10, so I think that will stand the test of time. If you've read either of these two books, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please let me know in the comments section. That's everything. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more reading vlogs or content like this again, please let me know. If you like and subscribe as well, that really helps me out if you enjoy my content. Yeah, that's everything. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have an amazing morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye!
So this is the first chapter, essentially. I should know that, really, shouldn't I? And it's voiced by a Gorgoneon, one of those Gorgon heads I was telling you about before. You should, if you can, imagine her with snaky hair and tusks and a big wide mouth and a lolling tongue. I see you. I see all those whom men call monsters. And I see the men who call them that. Call themselves heroes, of course. I only see them for an instant.